Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Carolyn. I'm a mama to twin toddlers named Summer and Winter, and we did a lot of travel over the past couple of years. Since they were born, we have flown internationally multiple times. At the age of 9 months, we went all the way from the US to Germany and back. We did the same flight again, round trip at 14 months, and then again at 22 months. We also took them on flights to Mexico, as well as to different states within the US, and numerous road trips in our VW van. When they were only 4 months old, we were out in the van for actually a whole month on the road visiting about 7 different states. So needless to say, we've learned quite a bit of tips along the way, and I want to share with you a huge Q&A for some of the questions that I've gotten. This video specifically is going to be revolving around the questions I've received about the baby bassinets in the airplanes that we've experienced, especially in long haul flights. So I'm going to share all of my answers to all of the questions that I have here on my iPad that I've received through TikTok videos. And I'm going to do furthermore a pretty big travel series now that we are getting ready to start traveling for the summer again. And I feel like everybody is in the same mindset. Like, we're planning travels and researching travel tips. So that's what I'm here for. I just want to help answer some questions. And if you have more that you think of, definitely please leave them in the comments. I would be happy to answer more travel questions in future videos. Thanks so much. And I hope that, as always, if you're not yet subscribed, subscribe to my channel. It definitely helps so that I can share this information with more families out there who are looking for tips on how to travel with little ones. And I would love to just get to know you. Say hey if you're new in the comments as well. All right, let's get into it. Okay, so the first question that I've received is, do you have to pay to reserve the airplane bassinets? So yes and no. Technically, because of the fact that when we first booked them, we were flying with our babies as infant babies. They did not have their own seats. So whenever we were booking the bassinets, we did have to call in advance to book our seats to be located next to the bassinets. And in order to pay for our seat location, we had to pay $40 per adult. And that was with Lufthansa as well as United Airlines. They charged the same for both of those airlines. So it was $40 per each adult for each direction. So in total, for a round trip with 2 adults, we paid $160 because it was $80 each way. And then we didn't have to pay anything else for the actual bassinet. It was just to pay for the location of the seat. Now, of course, if you had bought seats for your baby in addition to wanting to have a bassinet for them, then of course you'd have to pay to relocate their seats as well. Just something to know. Question number 2, when should we book the bassinet, before or after booking the tickets? This is also a really good question because when I first tried to book it, I realized that there was no option to book it online, and you do have to book it directly with somebody on the phone. But with that said, you actually need to do one of 2 things. Either book your ticket on the phone with a person who works from the airline so that you can actually book the exact seat that you want and you can make sure that the seat you want is available. Or option number 2, if you want to book online, then you can do that and then call the airline directly after you have your confirmation and let them know what your confirmation code is, and then they can move your seat to the location of the bassinet, and then they can add a note in your profile to have the bassinets available, and they can make sure that the bassinets are available for the flight that you want. I 100% recommend, before you do any type of booking, whether it's on the phone or online, definitely double check by calling the airline specifically that you're flying with. Call them directly. Don't call a third party. Like, ask them specifically, is the seat that I want available? Do you have bassinets available? Get that confirmation before you actually choose the flight that you want to go on, because you might not have the availability. And if that's a game changer for you, you might want to consider looking up other flights. So for us, it actually did happen one time where we really wanted to book a certain flight, and I called into the airline to double check that the bassinets were available, and they told us, nope, the bassinets are actually all taken. And we're like, okay, well, can you tell me another flight that has them available that's around that time? And so we just flew out like a day later, and it was totally fine. And in my opinion, totally worth it. Next question is, which airlines offer this? So to my understanding, the ones that we have used so far are Lufthansa, United Airlines, as well as Air Canada. And then I've also heard people commenting saying that Emirates also has it. And I've heard that there are a couple of different Asian airlines that also have it, but I haven't experienced those. I also received a comment from someone saying that British Airways has it, although the person that commented in that said that theirs did not seem nearly as nice as the ones that I posted my video content about. They said, you must have been in first class, and the ones that we received were like boxes on the wall. I was like, nope, we were not in first class. And in case you're wondering, that's probably an answer to some questions that people have, is we didn't opt for any upgraded seating except for choosing the seats that were in the Bassinet location. We were not in business class. We were never in first class. We literally just were in economy and used the bassinets that they had in economy for all of the flights that we were on. Which, like I said, the video content that I'm sharing is specifically with Lufthansa, United Airlines. Those are kind of like partnered together, as well as Air Canada. Next question is, I have read that children have to be between the age of 6 and 8 months old for them to be able to use the bassinets. Is this true? So to my knowledge, no, this is not true, but I guess every single airline does have different regulations, so definitely double check that. But the ones that we used were when our kids were only 9 months old. And when I say kids, I have twins, right? So it was both of them. They were both 9 months old, and it worked for both of them. And then that was going to Germany, and then flying back from Germany when they were 10 months old, it worked again, and they were just fine. We were really happy with our experience. And then when my twins were 14 months old, we flew to Germany again, and then coming back, it was only a couple weeks later, so they were still 14 months old. I will say at that time, my twins were getting pretty tight in there, so it didn't work out as well because of the length of the bassinets. Now, I think it has something to do with the fact that my twins are pretty tall. They're like 95th percentile height or something like that, which is just crazy. So they were definitely on the verge of not being able to fit anymore at 14 months, whereas I feel that if they were like an average size height, then they would have possibly fit. So I would probably recommend 12 months or less as being able to fit. Whereas above 12 months, it's kind of a hit or miss on if they're going to fit, depending on the airline and depending on how big or tall the baby is. Other questions that I saw come in were also asking, is the baby only allowed to use it before they're sitting up? And again, based on our experiences, they were allowed to use it when they were sitting up. They were allowed to use it when they were able to stand. Obviously, there are some safety issues there, so you have to make sure that your baby is going to lay down the whole time, because if they are trying to stand up or sit up in the bassinet, that's not safe. So I could understand if some airlines have that as a regulation. So again, double check with each airline specifically if that is a guideline that they have, because it seems like they all have different regulations. But again, the ones that we use didn't have that at all. Like our kids started sitting up at 6 months old, or even earlier, I don't remember, maybe 5 months old. And then after that, our kids were able to still actually sleep in the bassinets at 9 months old, 10 months old, and then at 14 months old, they were already starting to walk, and they were still allowed to use the bassinets then. So maybe it also just depends on who's working the flight and if they're being strict or not. For us, we've never had an issue, but again, some people have commented that in some of my TikTok videos, so I just want to bring that to your attention in case you're curious about different experiences that people have had regarding the different height and age and abilities that the kids have. Next question, are these only for international flights? So my understanding is they're pretty much only available on long haul flights or any airline that has a really large airplane, because not every airplane actually has it. It has to do with the size of the airplane and if they have it available. So for all the ones that we have experienced it on, it was for long haul flights. And when I say long haul flights, I mean they were about 10 hours or 11 hours long. And then we would have shorter flights that were only 1 to 4 hours long, where they did not have the bassinets available, whereas the long ones, of course, did, because it was an overnight and they needed to have a place to sleep, so it made more sense. Definitely, again, double check. I think it just depends on specifically which airline and the exact aircraft carrier that you have for your flight. And that's a huge part of why I recommend to call ahead before you choose your flight. If you're going to depend on it, you want to ask them ahead of time to know if it's even going to be available. Okay, somebody else said, this is so interesting. In the US, we put our kids in car seats on flights. I'm in the US too, and we have also flown with car seats. And if there is a question about safety, I would always say that car seats are, of course, going to be the safest option, but it depends on a few different factors. If one, you want to actually pay for an extra seat to book on a long haul flight where you're booking an extra seat so that the kid can actually ride in a car seat the whole time. Number two, you have to really think about if they're going to be comfortable in a car seat the whole time, or if they're going to be actually able to sleep in it or stay in it and be comfortable. I mean, there's so many different factors. And then of course, if you are wanting to make the trek and bring a car seat, I mean, there are a lot of things that go into it. Essentially, yes, it's safer, but it's more expensive. So that one's up to you. I mean, I never felt like we had any safety issues with the bassinets because one, they were right in front of me. If I ever had an issue, I could immediately grab them and have them as close to me as I wanted. And they also had a little buckle that went over them. Again, if there was anything of concern, I was always watching. Like, I don't think that it's responsible to go to sleep if your baby is flying with you, unless you're like having them literally attached to you in some way. So I stayed awake the whole time, every time that we flew, so that I could watch my kids. Either that or my husband and I would kind of like take turns, but it always turned out to be me awake, even when he had a chance to sleep. No, actually, and that's not his fault at all. It's not intentional. It's the funniest thing. It's like on one of the flights, they just really wanted me to hold them, and it was like I would pass one over to him and then they would want to go to sleep in the bassinet. And so they were like always sleeping in the bassinet with him. And then whoever was with me wanted to just hang out with mommy and play. And I was like, great, I'm just going to play for 10 hours. This is cool. Well, meanwhile, he got to like have the baby that was sleeping while I was like keeping an eye on both of them. Anyway, my point is I never felt like there was a safety issue because I was always awake and watching them. And I think same thing goes for if they were sitting in a seat, you would still want to keep an eye on them for their safety. Additionally, when you're booking bassinets, part of the reason why, of course, we book baby tickets, whether it's a lap infant ticket or a separate ticket, is that the airline makes sure that no matter how they put you in your seats, they do account for all of the heads, the actual humans that are in each seat, and they make sure that everyone has an oxygen mask in the event that something happens, that everybody would get one. So with that said, again, it depends on specifically which airline that you're with, but every single time that we flew with the bassinets, when we booked it in advance, we had nobody else sitting in our row. We actually had both bassinets available, and we usually had 3 or 4 seats to our family. So with that said, if there are 3 seats, there's usually 4 oxygen masks, which was perfect. And that's probably why they didn't put anybody else sitting with us. And then the 4-seater, of course, there's going to be 4 seats. So technically they could have put somebody else sitting with us, but they didn't, probably because we have 2 babies. And that's just one of the things about twins compared to if you're just flying with one baby, then there might be somebody else sitting next to you in a bassinet seat. Anyway, all the different things to think about. Additionally, it kind of helps if you just happen to be on a flight that isn't fully booked versus if they're trying to have one that's fully booked. Now, with the car seats, if you decide that you want to go that route instead of the bassinets, you can also chance it and try to see if there is an open seat and just bring your car seat and see if they'll let you use it on the airline. And we've done that before too. I don't think it's a horrible idea, but if you are going to do a long haul flight with a baby, it's definitely a little bit more risky, because you want to be able to have some solution for them rather than thinking that you just have to hold them the entire time for like a 10 or 11-hour flight. Yeah. I will say all the way up till the age of turning 2, we never booked an actual seat for them. We always had them as lap infants, except for that one time where I flew alone with them, in which case I did have to book an extra seat because only one baby is allowed to be a lap infant and the other one did need to have an official adult seat. But I can tell you that we've had both experiences with the car seats. We've had one experience where we got completely lucky and we got to have tons of extra space around us, and we brought both of our car seats and it was totally free and it was awesome. The other time, the people at the check-in desk just seemed to be in a bad mood and told us that it was a fully booked flight, and then it turned out that it was not a fully booked flight and they just told us no, that we couldn't bring our car seats for no reason. Not really sure why that happened. But regardless, we made it. Okay, the next person commented saying, every time I have attempted to book them, they are already booked. And of course, she's talking about the bassinets. tried at least half a dozen times on at least several different various international flights with twins. Oh, she has twins too. So we have had typical runway ahead of time. We've booked our flights at least 6 months ahead of time. At least I think that's what we did for when we flew with them at 9 and 10 months old. But we flew again when they were 14 months old, and we actually, this was a really short notice flight. We booked our tickets literally like 3 days before we flew. Not kidding. All the way from the US to Germany. It was because of a family thing. We needed to go visit my father-in-law as he was having surgery. And so with that said, we booked it very short notice, and it worked out. We got really lucky and we were able to use the bassinets all the way there. But booking our flight back, they were not available. And we tried really hard to see if we could find a flight that was available, but it seemed like almost all of them just weren't. So I was like, what are the chances that there are more, that there are this many babies on our flight at this time on this day? Like, it just seems crazy, but I guess people fly with babies a lot. And I think it's just going to get more and more in that direction now that things are opening back up again. I'm currently making this video in the spring of 2022. And I just think as time moves on, I will be happy to do more updates, but these are all of our experiences based on the past 2 years. So in other words, like I said, the best thing that you can do is call ahead to see what's available before you book. That way there's no issues with paying for something and then trying to get a refund if it's not available and all those things. Another person said, are you afraid of people in the aisle being close to your baby's head? So actually, this is something that is good to know. We always have the babies facing, how do you do this? So their heads are actually on the inside of where the seats are, and then their feet go towards the aisle. So I never had an issue with that because, like I said, I was like right where their body is and right where their head was, whereas their feet were closer to the aisle. So there was never really an issue of worrying about somebody like bumping into them or anything like that. But it's something to know, I guess, and to think about. So it was a good question. Another person asked, did they actually sleep on the flight? Yes, they did. Multiple times in the bassinet. Like, they looked quite comfortable. The one thing I would recommend though is that we brought their own sleep sacks so that they could be really comfortable and sleep in clothes that they're used to sleeping in for bedtime. And I would definitely recommend going through your entire nighttime routine if you have one, just to keep it simple and also keep it familiar. And we do this really anytime that we're traveling, just because it helps no matter what age they are. We try to go through our nighttime routine and whatever that may be, whether it's eating, having milk, brushing our teeth, getting dressed for bed, reading a book, listening to music, any of those things. We try to go through our same routine so that it keeps it familiar. With that said, other ways that you can make them more comfortable in the bassinet is by having extra blankets, and you can ask the airline for this. They will happily provide it. They'll also provide a pillow. But of course, it's funny because before the age of 12 months, our kids weren't sleeping with blankets and pillows and all of those extra things because that's the safer way to do it. But given that it was a different circumstance and I was literally, again, watching them, like they were right in front of me, I was like, I just want them to be comfortable and I'm going to watch them anyway. So I know that they're not going to turn on to their, tummy and have any issues or anything like that. So that was good. But yeah, the best recommendation that I can make is just, again, trying to bring like comfort toys, comfort clothes, bedtime clothes, things like that that make them comfortable, that'll help them get into that sleepy time mode. One more thing I actually am editing and going back and adding is I want to remind you that they are more likely to sleep if you're on a nighttime flight versus a daytime flight. That's just something else to consider. But you can also try to coordinate around their nap times. What did you do for changing diapers? That's another good question. I mean, so every single airline usually also puts a restroom really close to the bassinets, which is actually really nice. So basically on every airline that we used the bassinets on, they were in the front row of the economy section that we were in. So essentially you're right next to the restrooms on either side. And the restrooms usually all have a changing table. Every once in a while there's one that doesn't, but usually there's one right next to it that does. So the other thing I noticed is that there are different size changing tables in each of the restrooms on the airplanes. So depending on what specific aircraft you're on, as well as depending on which side you're on, some of the different changing stations might be slightly different. So I would also recommend when you get onto your airplane, before you get all situated and stuff, maybe just peek into each of the restrooms and double check to see which one has the biggest changing table and take note of that so that it's easy to go into that one later on when you actually need it. One other recommendation, I was just reading through some more comments about asking about what size the actual bassinet is. I think each airline is slightly different. So my other recommendation is when you request information about specific aircraft or what plane you're actually flying on, ask them how big the bassinet is, and they should be able to give you specific dimensions or at least the length so that you have an idea of if it's something that your baby is going to fit in. Do you have leg room when you're sitting with the bassinets? Actually, yes. In fact, more leg room than most of all the other economy seats. Here's the funny thing. If you wanted to request the exact same location where the bassinets are and you're not flying with a baby, I believe when we tried to see what it costs on the same airlines that we had to pay originally $40 to fly there with a baby, flying without, it would have been like $120 to sit there per adult, versus flying with a baby, it's only $40 because, you know, it's like a different purpose. It's like if you're going to use the bassinets, they say it's only $40 per adult seat to sit there because you have a baby with you and you're using the bassinet. Whereas if you're flying without a baby and you just want to sit there for the leg room, then they charge like $120 per adult. And I was like, interesting. So anyway, essentially it's a lot more leg room, but obviously the room is taken up by the bassinet, in which case that's why, you know, it's only an upcharge of $40 if you're actually using the bassinet, because that's the only location that they have it on the airplane with. So yeah, anyway. And if you're curious about how many bassinets each airplane has, again, every single aircraft is different, but typically what I've seen is either 2 or 4. They usually have a row that has 2 right next to each other. And of course, when we're flying with twins, then we have both of them. But I've seen some larger airplanes where they have another section where it has them again with 2 more. And I mean, maybe there's even bigger airplanes that have more than 4. And that's just economy. I'm sure there's other options that are in business class or first class or any of that kind of thing. Another person is asking, what did the harness look like? And do the babies have a seatbelt option if they're sitting on your lap? So yes and yes, kind of. So when they're in the actual bassinet, they do have a strap that goes over them, basically making sure that they're not going to fall out, but it's not going to hold them still because obviously they're not like strapped down while they're sleeping. So again, that's why I watch them, and that's why I think adult supervision is obviously required. Anytime that you're flying with a baby, you're obviously going to be a parent and watch them. But with that said, if it does get bumpy or if the seatbelt sign comes on or any of those things, then you are required to take them out of the bassinet and have them strapped to you on your lap. And all of the long haul flights that I have been on, they actually provided us with a seatbelt that connected to our seatbelt. So it was like a baby seatbelt that connected to our adult seatbelt, making it so they were actually strapped to us. And then even in addition to that, obviously I'm holding them close anytime there's bumps and trying to make sure that they're really safe and keeping their head close to me and keeping their neck safe and all the things that you do as a parent to keep your kids safe. So at the end of the day, I would say, you know, if you're debating about the safety of the bassinets, we had no issues with them. I would absolutely recommend them to a friend, but it's obviously up to you. Every single person has their own personal preference. So you can make your decision based on how you personally feel about that, if you want to use it or not. Like I said, the car seats are also a great option if you want to transport it through the airport and take it everywhere with you. And I've got a whole nother video all about how to travel with car seats and some tips on that if you are thinking about doing that as an alternative. I will leave that as a link below in the description. And again, let me know if you have any other questions. I think I answered all of the main ones that were commented on all of my videos. But if there is any other questions that you do have that pop up that you just think of, that you want to know about baby bassinets on airplanes, or if you want to just know in general more tips about flying, I've got lots of different ideas and videos that I have made about how to fly with little ones from the age of basically 0 through 2 years old, because that's what we've done so far. So if you have questions, definitely check those out and let me know in the comments if there's anything else that you want me to address. I'm also linking a couple of videos below with specific vlogs of our travel experiences so that you can see all of these things that I'm talking about in action. Again, thanks so much for being here. I hope that this was a little bit helpful if you're considering flying with your little ones. And I am so excited to just be a resource for you. So again, if you're not subscribed, please subscribe. It means a lot, and it would also help me to be able to share this with more families like this video, because it helps me to also reach more families. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks. Have a great day. Bye.